The morning sun cast long shadows across the Navy SEAL training facility at Coronado as Colonel James Morrison stepped out of his black SUV. At 52, Morrison carried himself with the bearing of a man who had seen 3 decades of military service, from the dusty mountains of Afghanistan to the humid jungles of Central America. His weathered face bore the map of countless missions, and his steel-gray eyes had witnessed both the best and worst of human nature. Today was supposed to be routine. Another evaluation of SEAL sniper capabilities, another assessment of the unit's readiness. Morrison had conducted hundreds of these inspections throughout his career, and he approached each one with the same methodical precision that had earned him his rank and reputation. The facility buzzed with its usual morning energy. SEALs moved with purposeful efficiency across the compound, their conversations punctuated by the occasional bark of commands from instructors. The smell of coffee mixed with the salt air from the Pacific, creating an atmosphere that was both military and coastal California laid back. Morrison's aide, Captain Sarah Chen, fell into step beside him as they approached the main administration building. "Sir, we have the full roster for today's evaluation. 12 snipers from Team 6, along with their support personnel. The range master has everything set up according to your specifications." "Good," Morrison replied, adjusting his service cap against the morning breeze. "I want to see these boys push their limits today. The reports I've been getting suggest this unit has the potential to be exceptional." What neither Morrison nor Chen knew was that their carefully planned day was about to be turned completely upside down by someone who wasn't even supposed to be there. Across the base, in the family housing area, 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was having what her mother would later describe as one of those mornings. Emma had always been different from other children her age. While her classmates played with dolls or video games, Emma preferred taking apart mechanical toys to understand how they worked. While they watched cartoons, she studied her father's military manuals with an intensity that both impressed and concerned her parents. Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez had served with SEAL Team 6 for 8 years, specializing in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. His wife, Maria, worked as a nurse at the base medical facility. They had always known Emma was special, but they had no idea just how special until that particular Tuesday morning. "Emma, honey, you need to get ready for school," Maria called from the kitchen, where she was preparing breakfast and packing her own lunch for her shift at the hospital. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing her school uniform, but her expression was troubled. "Mama, I don't feel good," she said, placing a small hand on her stomach. Maria looked at her daughter with the practiced eye of both a mother and a healthcare professional. Emma's color was normal, her temperature felt fine, and she had eaten dinner normally the night before. But there was something in the child's eyes that gave Maria pause. "What kind of not good, Mija?" Maria asked, kneeling down to Emma's level. Emma fidgeted with the hem of her school skirt. "My stomach feels funny, and my head hurts a little. Can I stay home today? Please?" Maria checked her watch. She had an early shift at the medical center, and Miguel had already left for his training exercises. Normally, she would have taken Emma to school regardless of minor complaints, but something about her daughter's demeanor made her reconsider. "Okay," Maria said finally. "But you're coming with me to work, and if you're feeling better by lunch, you're going to school in the afternoon. Deal?" Emma nodded solemnly, already feeling better about her day. An hour later, Maria was dropping Emma off at the base daycare facility, which was located just a short walk from both the medical center and the main training areas. The daycare supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, was an experienced woman who had been caring for military children for over 20 years. "She's not feeling completely well," Maria explained to Mrs. Patterson. "Just keep an eye on her, and call me if anything changes." Mrs. Patterson nodded understandingly. "We'll take good care of her. Emma's always such a good girl." What Mrs. Patterson didn't anticipate was that Emma's idea of a good day didn't necessarily align with staying quietly in the daycare center. Around 10 o'clock, as the other children settled into their morning activities, Emma found herself increasingly restless. She had read all the books in the daycare's small library at least 3 times, had completed 2 puzzles meant for children twice her age, and was growing bored with the educational games the staff had provided. Through the window, she could see groups of military personnel moving purposefully across the base. Her father had taught her to recognize different units by their uniforms and equipment, and she spotted what she knew were SEALs heading toward the training facilities. Emma's curiosity got the better of her. She waited until Mrs. Patterson was helping another child with a craft project, then quietly slipped out the back door of the daycare center. Her plan was simple: take a quick walk around the base, maybe see what her father was up to, and return before anyone noticed she was gone. The 8-year-old had spent enough time on the base to know her way around. She headed toward the training facilities, following the sounds of activity and the occasional crack of gunfire from the ranges. Meanwhile, Colonel Morrison was beginning his formal evaluation of the sniper team. The SEALs had assembled at the main rifle range, where targets had been set up at distances ranging from 300 to 1,200 meters. Each sniper carried his personally customized weapon system, the product of years of training and thousands of rounds downrange. "Gentlemen," Morrison addressed the assembled group, "today's evaluation will test not just your marksmanship, but your ability to adapt to changing conditions, work under pressure, and maintain consistency across multiple scenarios." The snipers stood at attention, their faces showing the focused intensity that was the hallmark of their profession. These were men who had been selected from among the best soldiers in the military, then put through training that had a success rate of less than 20%. Each one represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in training and equipment. Petty Officer First Class Jake Thompson, the team leader, stepped forward. "Sir, the team is ready for evaluation." Morrison nodded approvingly. Thompson had an impressive record, with confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,000 meters in 3 different combat theaters. His file indicated he was being considered for promotion and additional responsibilities. "Very well," Morrison said. "We'll begin with individual precision tests, then move to team coordination exercises. I want to see your best work today." What none of them noticed was the small figure that had appeared at the edge of the range, partially hidden behind a maintenance shed. Emma had followed the sound of voices and found herself with a perfect view of the training exercise about to unfold. The first sniper took his position behind a Barrett .50 caliber rifle, adjusting his scope and checking wind conditions. The target, a standard military silhouette, stood 800 meters downrange. This was considered a moderate challenge for a SEAL sniper, well within the capability range of anyone on the team. Emma watched with fascination as the sniper went through his preparation routine. She had seen her father clean and maintain his weapons at home, and had absorbed more about firearms and ballistics than most adults would ever know. Her young mind began analyzing what she was observing, processing the information with an intensity that would have surprised anyone who knew her. The sniper fired. The shot was good, hitting the target center mass. Morrison made a note on his evaluation sheet, nodding with satisfaction. Next, Thompson called out. As each sniper took his turn, Emma found herself silently critiquing their techniques. She noticed small things: how one man's breathing pattern seemed slightly irregular, how another's rifle position created an unnecessary stress point, how the wind flags weren't being read quite correctly for the longer distance shots. Her father had always encouraged her curiosity about his work, explaining the basics of ballistics and marksmanship in terms an 8-year-old could understand. He had never intended to create a tactical prodigy, but Emma's natural intelligence combined with her constant exposure to military precision had created exactly that. After watching for nearly 30 minutes, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She stepped out from behind the shed and walked directly onto the range. "Excuse me," she said in her clear, young voice. Every head turned toward the sound. Morrison's expression went from surprise to concern to outright disbelief as he took in the sight of a small girl in a school uniform standing in the middle of a live fire exercise. "What the hell?" Thompson muttered under his breath. Morrison immediately raised his hand to halt all activity. "Cease fire. Everyone step back from your weapons." Emma walked closer, seemingly unaware of the breach of protocol she had just committed. "I've been watching you shoot," she said matter-of-factly, "and I think there might be some things you could do better." The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison stared at the child, trying to process what he was hearing. Here was an 8-year-old girl critiquing the performance of some of the most elite marksmen in the United States military. "Seriously?" Morrison said, and, despite himself, he began to laugh. It wasn't a mean laugh, but rather the kind of bemused chuckle that comes from encountering something so unexpected that it defies rational response. Several of the SEALs exchanged glances. They had all heard about military children who grew up around the service and picked up knowledge through osmosis, but this was something else entirely. "Little girl," Morrison said, his voice gentle but firm, "this is a restricted area. Where are your parents?" Emma stood her ground with the confidence of someone much older. "My daddy is Sergeant Rodriguez from Team 6, and my mama works at the medical center." I'm Emma. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. Rodriguez? You mean Miguel Rodriguez? Yes, sir, Emma replied politely. Thompson looked at Morrison. Sir, Rodriguez is one of our best. His daughter, well, she's always been around the base. We all know her. Morrison studied the child more carefully. There was something about her demeanor that was remarkably composed for someone who had just interrupted a military exercise. Emma, he said, this is a very dangerous place for children. We use real bullets here. I know, Emma replied. That's why it's important to do it right. The simplicity of her statement caught Morrison off guard. What do you mean? Emma pointed toward the 800-meter target. The man who shot at that target, his breathing was off. He was holding his breath too long before the trigger pull, which made his hand shake just a little. And the one before him had his bipod legs uneven, so his rifle was canted maybe 2 degrees to the left. Morrison felt his eyebrows climbing toward his hairline. These were observations that would have been impressive coming from an experienced range instructor, let alone a child. And, Emma continued, warming to her subject, nobody's been accounting for the Coriolis effect properly at these distances. The Earth's rotation matters when you're shooting past 600 meters. Now Morrison was genuinely stunned. The Coriolis effect was an advanced ballistics concept that many military snipers never fully mastered. It referred to the way the Earth's rotation could affect the trajectory of a long-range projectile, causing it to drift slightly from its intended path. Thompson stepped forward, his expression serious. Emma, who taught you about the Coriolis effect? My daddy explained it to me, Emma said. And I read about it in his books. It's not that hard to understand if you think about it like being on a spinning playground. Morrison made a decision that would have seemed insane to him just 5 minutes earlier. Emma, he said, would you like to show us what you mean? The child's face lit up with excitement. Really? Really, Morrison confirmed, already wondering if he had lost his mind. What happened next would become the subject of countless retellings throughout the special operations community. Emma approached the firing line with the careful attention of someone who understood she was in a potentially dangerous environment. She examined the rifle setup, the target arrangement, and the environmental conditions with a methodical precision that impressed every observer. Can I look through the scope? She asked politely. Thompson adjusted the rifle to a safe position and helped Emma get behind it properly. She was too small to operate the weapon normally, but she could observe through the optic system. Emma spent several minutes studying the target through the scope, occasionally glancing at the wind flags and checking the angle of the sun. Finally, she stepped back. The wind's coming from the southwest at about 8 miles per hour, but it's gusting to maybe 12, she said. At 800 meters, that's going to push the bullet about 4 inches to the right. Plus the Coriolis effect will add another 1.5 inches to the right at this latitude. So you need to aim about 5.5 inches to the left of center. Morrison looked at Thompson, who looked at the other snipers. None of them had made calculations quite that precise, though their instinctive adjustments had been in the right direction. That's actually very close to correct, Thompson admitted. Emma beamed with pride. My daddy says that shooting is just math and physics with really expensive tools. Morrison found himself laughing again, but this time it wasn't from disbelief. It was from genuine appreciation for the most unusual tactical consultation he had ever received. Emma, he said, I think we need to have a longer conversation. But first, we should probably call your mother and let her know where you are. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Maria Rodriguez came running across the range, her face flushed with panic and exertion. Mrs. Patterson was close behind her, looking equally distressed. Emma Rodriguez. Maria called out as she approached. What do you think you're doing? Emma's confident demeanor evaporated instantly as she recognized the tone in her mother's voice. She was in trouble, and she knew it. I'm sorry, Mama, she said, her voice small. I just wanted to see what Daddy does at work. Morrison stepped forward, extending his hand to Maria. Mrs. Rodriguez? I'm Colonel Morrison. I think your daughter may have just provided some of the most insightful tactical observations I've ever heard. Maria looked back and forth between the colonel and her daughter, trying to understand what had happened. I'm so sorry, sir. Emma was supposed to be at the daycare center. I had no idea she had wandered off. No harm done, Morrison assured her. In fact, Emma may have done us a considerable favor. Would you mind if we continued our conversation with her? With your permission, of course, and with you present. Maria looked at her daughter, who was practically bouncing with excitement despite having just been in trouble. What kind of conversation? Morrison smiled. The kind where I try to understand how an 8-year-old just outanalyzed some of my best snipers. And so began the most unusual military evaluation in the history of SEAL Team 6. What had started as a routine assessment of sniper capabilities had transformed into something much more significant, the discovery of a tactical mind that defied conventional understanding. As the group moved to a nearby briefing room, Emma walking between her mother and Colonel Morrison, none of them could have predicted that this chance encounter would ultimately rewrite every record in the SEAL sniper program. The little girl who had interrupted a military exercise was about to prove that sometimes the most profound insights come from the most unexpected sources. The morning sun climbed higher over Coronado, and the day that had begun so routinely was about to become extraordinary in ways that no one could have imagined. The briefing room at the SEAL facility had seen its share of important meetings over the years. Plans for classified missions, debriefs from successful operations, and strategic discussions that affected national security had all taken place within its windowless walls. But never before had it hosted a tactical consultation with an 8-year-old. Colonel Morrison sat across from Emma Rodriguez, while her mother Maria occupied the chair beside her daughter. The room also contained Petty Officer Thompson, Captain Chen, and Range Master Chief Petty Officer Dennis Walsh, a grizzled veteran with over 25 years of special operations experience. Emma, Morrison began, his tone respectful but curious. I want you to understand that what happened out there was very unusual. The things you noticed about our snipers' techniques were quite advanced. Can you tell me more about what you've learned from your father? Emma sat up straight in her chair, her legs swinging slightly because her feet didn't quite reach the floor. Daddy doesn't really teach me on purpose, she said honestly. But he likes to explain things when I ask questions. And I ask a lot of questions. Maria smiled despite her lingering concern about the morning's events. That's an understatement. Emma has been asking why and how about everything since she could talk. What kind of things does your father explain to you? Thompson asked, genuinely interested. Emma's eyes lit up as she began to recount her informal education. Well, he showed me how bullets work differently at different distances. Like, up close they go pretty straight, but far away, gravity pulls them down and wind pushes them sideways. And he explained about how the rifle has to be really steady, because even a tiny movement gets bigger and bigger the farther the bullet travels. Walsh leaned forward. That's basic ballistics, but accurate. What else? Oh, lots of stuff, Emma continued enthusiastically. Like how the earth spinning makes bullets go a little bit sideways on long shots. And how hot air and cold air make bullets go different places. And how different bullets work better for different jobs. Morrison exchanged a look with his aide. These weren't concepts typically understood by military personnel without specialized training, let alone by elementary school children. Emma, Morrison said, when you were watching our snipers today, you mentioned specific things you noticed. Can you tell us more about that? Emma nodded eagerly. Well, the first man was holding his breath too long. Daddy told me that when you hold your breath, your heart keeps beating and it makes your hands shake just a tiny bit. You're supposed to take a breath, let it out halfway, then shoot pretty quick. Thompson nodded slowly. That's exactly right. We call it natural respiratory pause. And the rifle that was tilted, Emma continued, that's called cant error. If the rifle isn't perfectly level, the bullet will go in a curve instead of straight. The farther you shoot, the more wrong it gets. Chief Walsh was beginning to look impressed despite himself. Most of our guys take months to really understand cant error. Where did you learn that term? From Daddy's books, Emma said simply. He has lots of books about shooting. I like the ones with pictures and diagrams. Maria interjected, looking somewhat embarrassed. I probably should have been monitoring her reading more carefully. I just thought she was looking at the pictures. Morrison waved off her concern. Mrs. Rodriguez, I think your daughter has a very special gift. The question is what we should do about it. What do you mean? Maria asked, a note of protective concern creeping into her voice. Morrison said carefully that Emma has demonstrated an understanding of advanced marksmanship principles that surpasses many professional soldiers. I'm wondering if she might be willing to help us with a little experiment. Emma perked up immediately. What kind of experiment? Morrison looked at the other adults in the room, then back at Emma. We'd like to see if your observations can actually help improve our snipers' performance. Would you be willing to watch them shoot again and tell us what you notice? Can I really help? Emma asked, her voice filled with excitement. You already have, Thompson said. What the colonel is asking is whether you'd like to help more. Maria held up a hand. Wait a minute. Are you talking about putting my daughter in a dangerous situation? Not at all, Morrison assured her. Emma would be observing from a completely safe position, just like she was doing this morning. The only difference is that this time, we'd be specifically asking for her input. Chief Walsh spoke up. Ma'am, if your daughter has the ability to spot technical flaws that we're missing, that could potentially save lives in combat situations. This isn't about putting her at risk, it's about learning from her unique perspective. Maria looked at her daughter, who was practically vibrating with enthusiasm at the prospect of being officially helpful to her father's unit. Please, Mama? Emma asked. I promise I'll be really careful and do exactly what everyone tells me to do. After a moment of consideration, Maria nodded. Okay, but I'm staying with her the entire time. And if I say we're done, we're done. Absolutely, Morrison agreed. This is completely voluntary, and safety is our top priority. 20 minutes later, the group had returned to the firing range. This time, however, the setup was different. Emma had been provided with a small chair and a pair of binoculars, positioned at a safe observation point with clear sightlines to both the firing positions and the targets. Morrison addressed the assembled snipers, who had been briefed on the unusual nature of the afternoon's exercise. Gentlemen, we're going to try something that has never been attempted in military training. Emma Rodriguez is going to observe your shooting and provide feedback based on her analysis of your techniques. Several of the snipers exchanged skeptical glances. The idea of taking tactical advice from a child was challenging to accept, regardless of her morning performance. Petty Officer 2nd Class Marcus Williams, a veteran of 4 combat deployments, spoke up. Sir, with respect, are we really going to have a kid tell us how to do our jobs? Morrison's expression became serious. Petty Officer Williams, this morning that kid identified technical flaws in sniper techniques that none of us caught. I'm not asking you to follow her advice blindly, but I am asking you to listen to her observations with an open mind. Thompson stepped forward. Williams, Emma's father is Miguel Rodriguez. You know Miguel's reputation. If his daughter has inherited even a fraction of his tactical understanding, we'd be stupid not to pay attention. Williams nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. I'll keep an open mind. Morrison turned to Emma, who was adjusting her binoculars and studying the range setup with intense concentration. Emma, are you ready? Yes, sir, she replied formally, clearly taking her role seriously. The first test involved shooting at targets placed at 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. Each sniper would fire 3 rounds at each distance, with Emma observing and providing feedback after each shooter finished. Petty Officer Williams took the first position. He was an excellent marksman with a solid combat record, but his morning performance had been slightly below his usual standards. As he prepared for his first shot, Emma focused her binoculars on his position. Williams fired his first round at the 600-meter target. It was a good hit, but slightly right of center. The bullet went a little bit to the right, Emma called out. I think maybe the rifle is canted just a tiny bit, or maybe the wind reading was off. Williams checked his rifle position and made a small adjustment. His second shot was dead center. Better, Emma said approvingly. The rifle position looked more level that time. As Williams moved to the 800-meter target, Emma continued her observations. Your breathing looks good now, but you might want to check your natural point of aim. When you move the rifle to track the target, your body position changes a little bit. Williams was beginning to look interested despite his initial skepticism. Emma's suggestions were technically sound and delivered without any trace of condescension. She was simply observing and reporting what she saw. By the time Williams finished his series, his accuracy had improved noticeably. His group at 1,000 meters was the tightest he had shot in months. How did she know about natural point of aim? Williams asked Thompson quietly. I have no idea, Thompson replied, but she's right every time. The next sniper, Petty Officer First Class David Chen, took his position. Chen was known for his exceptional long-range capabilities, but he had been struggling with consistency in recent training sessions. As Chen prepared for his first shot, Emma studied his setup intently. His position looks really good, she announced. But I think his scope might not be set exactly right for this distance. Chief Walsh raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that, Emma? The way he's holding his head, Emma explained. He's tilting it just a little bit to get the sight picture right. That usually means the scope isn't mounted perfectly parallel to the rifle bore. Chen paused his preparation and looked back at the observation position. She might be right. This scope was just remounted after maintenance. Morrison made a note to have the scope checked by an armorer. Continue with your shots, Chen, but adjust your head position to what feels natural. Chen's subsequent shots showed the same pattern Emma had predicted. His groups were good, but consistently off in the same direction, suggesting a systematic error in the rifle setup. As the afternoon progressed, Emma provided observations for each sniper. Her comments ranged from technical details about equipment setup to subtle aspects of shooting technique that even experienced instructors might miss. For Petty Officer James Martinez, she noticed that his trigger finger placement was slightly off, causing him to pull shots to the left. For Staff Sergeant Robert Kim, she identified a flinch pattern that was so subtle it was almost undetectable, but which consistently affected his follow-through. The most remarkable moment came when Petty Officer First Class Thomas Anderson took his position for the 1,000-meter shots. Anderson was considered the best long-range shooter in the unit, with several confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,200 meters in combat situations. As Anderson prepared for his first shot, Emma watched through her binoculars with the same intensity she had shown all afternoon. But, this time, after several minutes of observation, she lowered her binoculars with a puzzled expression. Is everything okay, Emma? Morrison asked. I can't see anything wrong, Emma admitted. His position looks perfect, his breathing is right, the rifle setup looks good. He's really, really good at this. Anderson smiled and fired his shot. It was a perfect center hit. See? Emma said, raising her binoculars again. He makes it look easy. Anderson's remaining shots were equally impressive, and Emma had no corrections to offer. Sometimes, she observed, people just do everything right. As the shooting exercise concluded, Morrison gathered the group for a debriefing. The improvement in accuracy across the unit had been measurable and significant. Several long-standing technical issues had been identified and corrected based on Emma's observations. Emma, Morrison said, you've helped these men become better at their jobs. Do you understand how important that is? Emma nodded seriously. If they're better at shooting, they're safer when they have to protect people, right? Exactly right, Morrison confirmed. Your observations today may help save lives. Thompson approached Emma with something approaching awe. Emma, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone with your ability to spot technical flaws. It's like you can see things the rest of us miss. Emma looked thoughtful. Maybe it's because I'm smaller, she said. I see things from a different angle than grown-ups do. Chief Walsh chuckled. Out of the mouths of babes, he muttered. She might be onto something there. As the group prepared to leave the range, Morrison pulled Maria aside. Mrs. Rodriguez, I hope you understand what happened here today. Your daughter has a remarkable gift. Maria looked at Emma, who was chatting animatedly with several of the snipers about different types of rifle scopes. What are you suggesting, Colonel? I'm not sure yet, Morrison admitted. But I think Emma could make significant contributions to our training programs. Obviously, she's too young for any kind of formal role, but perhaps we could arrange for her to observe training sessions periodically. Her insights could be invaluable. Maria considered this carefully. As long as it doesn't interfere with her schooling, and as long as it remains completely safe, I suppose I'm open to the idea. But Emma is still a child, and her childhood comes first. Absolutely, Morrison agreed. We would never want to compromise her development or put her in any danger. As the family prepared to leave, Emma turned back to Colonel Morrison with a question that would haunt him for days to come. "Colonel Morrison," she said. "Could I ask you something?" "Of course, Emma." "What is it?" "Well," Emma said, fidgeting with her hands, "I was wondering, do you think I could ever learn to actually shoot? Not just watch, but really shoot?" Morrison felt his breath catch. The question was logical from Emma's perspective, but it opened up a realm of possibilities that he wasn't sure how to handle. That's a very good question, Emma," he said finally. "Let me think about that." As the Rodriguez family walked away across the base, Morrison stood watching them go. In the space of a single day, his understanding of human potential had been fundamentally challenged by an 8-year-old girl who saw the world with remarkable clarity. The question Emma had asked would keep him awake that night, not because it was inappropriate, but because it forced him to confront a possibility that seemed impossible, that the most gifted tactical mind he had ever encountered might be trapped in the body of a third grader. Tomorrow, Morrison would begin making phone calls to experts in child development, educational psychology, and advanced military training. He had to understand whether Emma's gifts could be developed safely and appropriately, or whether they should simply be appreciated and left alone. But tonight, as he reviewed the day's shooting scores and noted the dramatic improvements that had resulted from Emma's observations, Colonel Morrison found himself wondering if he had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. The little girl who had wandered onto his firing range might just rewrite everything they thought they knew about military training and human potential. The sun was setting over Coronado, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Somewhere on the base, an 8-year-old girl was probably doing her homework, completely unaware that she had just changed the course of special operations training forever. 3 weeks after Emma Rodriguez first wandered onto the SEAL training range, Colonel Morrison found himself in a conference room at the Pentagon, facing a panel of officials who seemed to be having difficulty believing his report. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Colonel," said Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a child psychologist who specialized in gifted education. "You're telling us that an 8-year-old civilian has been providing tactical consultation to SEAL Team 6 snipers?" Morrison nodded calmly. "That's correct, ma'am. And, in every case, her observations have led to measurable improvements in performance." General Robert Hayes, the commanding officer for Special Operations on the West Coast, leaned forward in his chair. "Morrison, I've known you for 12 years. You're one of the most level-headed officers in my command. But, this report reads like something out of a science fiction novel." "I understand your skepticism, sir," Morrison replied. 3 weeks ago, I would have had the same reaction. But, the results speak for themselves. Morrison activated the presentation system and displayed a series of charts showing before and after shooting scores for the SEAL sniper team. The improvements were dramatic and consistent across all shooters. Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in child development from the Naval Medical Research Center, studied the data carefully. "These improvements are statistically significant," she said. "But, how do we know they're actually attributable to the child's input rather than just natural variation in performance?" Morrison clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed breakdown of specific technical issues that had been identified and corrected. Because Emma didn't just say shoot better. She identified specific mechanical and technical problems that our instructors had missed. Problems that, when corrected, led to immediate and sustained improvement. The room fell silent as the officials absorbed the implications of what Morrison was presenting. "Colonel," said Dr. Hoffman, "assuming your data is accurate, we need to discuss the ethical implications of involving a child in military training activities. There are significant concerns about exploitation, psychological impact, and appropriate development." Morrison had been expecting this objection. "Dr. Hoffman, I share those concerns completely. That's why I've recommended that we bring in experts like yourself to establish proper protocols. Emma's well-being must be our top priority." General Hayes spoke up. "What exactly are you proposing, Morrison?" "Sir, I believe we have an opportunity to learn from Emma's unique perspective while ensuring her safety and normal development. I'm proposing a carefully controlled research program that would allow us to understand her capabilities while providing appropriate support and education." Dr. Chan looked up from her notes. "Has anyone conducted formal testing of the child's cognitive abilities?" "Not yet," Morrison admitted. "Her parents have been understandably cautious about subjecting her to extensive evaluation. But they've agreed to allow some basic assessments if we can demonstrate that Emma's participation is voluntary and beneficial to her development. The discussion continued for another hour, covering everything from security clearances to educational psychology. Finally, General Hayes made a decision that would change the trajectory of military training research. "Colonel Morrison," he said, "I'm authorizing a limited pilot program. You will work with Dr. Hoffman and Dr. Chen to develop protocols that prioritize the child's well-being while allowing us to understand her capabilities. This program will be classified at the secret level, and participation will be strictly voluntary for all parties." 2 weeks later, Emma Rodriguez found herself in a specially constructed observation facility at the Coronado base. The room had been designed with input from child development experts to create an environment that was both secure and age-appropriate. Emma sat in a comfortable chair designed for her size, with advanced optics equipment that allowed her to observe training exercises in detail. Her mother Maria was present, as was Dr. Hoffman, who had become Emma's advocate and monitor throughout the process. "Are you ready for today's exercise, Emma?" asked Morrison, who had taken personal responsibility for the program's implementation. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Over the past month, her unofficial role as a tactical observer had become the highlight of her week. She looked forward to the training sessions with an eagerness that reminded everyone involved of her essential nature as an 8-year-old child. Today's exercise was different from previous sessions. Instead of observing basic marksmanship training, Emma would be watching a complex scenario that combined long-range shooting with tactical decision-making. The scenario involved a simulated hostage rescue situation, where snipers had to engage multiple targets at varying distances while avoiding civilian mannequins placed throughout the target area. It was the kind of challenging exercise that tested not just shooting skills, but judgment, timing, and stress management. As the first team took their positions, Emma adjusted her observation equipment and began her analysis. The targets were placed at distances ranging from 400 to 1200 meters, with some partially concealed behind cover. "The angle on the 800-meter target looks tricky," Emma observed, speaking into a headset that connected her to the exercise controllers. "The shooter might need to account for the fact that he's shooting slightly uphill." Thompson, who was coordinating the exercise, made note of Emma's observation. The target in question was indeed positioned on a slight elevation that could affect bullet trajectory. As the exercise progressed, Emma provided a running commentary that demonstrated her understanding of complex tactical situations. She identified optimal shooting positions, predicted how environmental factors would affect each shot, and even made suggestions about the sequence in which targets should be engaged. "If they take the targets from left to right," she said, "the last shooter will have a clear field of fire. But if they start from the right, the middle shooter might get blocked by smoke from the other positions." Dr. Hoffman made notes throughout Emma's observations, documenting both the technical accuracy of her assessments and her emotional state during the exercise. Despite the intensity of the simulated combat scenario, Emma remained calm and focused, treating the exercise like a complex puzzle to be solved. When the exercise concluded, the results were once again impressive. The team had achieved their best performance on this particular scenario, with improved accuracy and more efficient target engagement sequences. "Emma," Morrison said after the debriefing, "your observations helped the team complete that exercise faster and more accurately than they ever have before. How do you feel about that?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I feel good that I could help," she said. "But I also feel like I want to understand more about how everything works." "What do you mean?" Dr. Hoffman asked gently. Emma fidgeted in her chair, clearly trying to articulate something that was important to her. "I can see what people are doing wrong, and I can see what they should do instead. But I don't really know what it feels like to actually do it myself." The adults in the room exchanged meaningful glances. Emma had just expressed the desire that Morrison had been anticipating for weeks. "Emma," Morrison said carefully, "are you saying you'd like to try shooting yourself?" Emma's eyes lit up with excitement, but she looked at her mother before answering. "Could I? I mean, if it's safe and if Mama says it's okay?" Maria had been dreading this moment since the program began. She understood that Emma's curiosity about actually shooting was natural, but the idea of her 8-year-old daughter handling weapons made her deeply uncomfortable. "I don't know, Mija," Maria said softly. "That seems very dangerous." Dr. Hoffman leaned forward. "Mrs. Rodriguez, from a developmental standpoint, it's actually quite normal for children to want to progress from observation to participation. The question is whether we can create conditions that are both safe and appropriate for Emma's age. Morrison had been preparing for this conversation for days. Mrs. Rodriguez, if Emma is interested in trying to shoot, we could start with something very controlled and safe. Perhaps an air rifle or a .22 caliber rifle with extensive safety measures. But, she's 8 years old, Maria protested. Isn't she too young to handle real weapons? Chief Walsh, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up. Ma'am, with respect, age isn't always the determining factor. I've seen 12-year-olds who couldn't safely handle a toy gun, and I've seen 10-year-olds who understood firearm safety better than some adults. It's about maturity, understanding, and proper supervision. Emma looked at her mother with an expression that was both hopeful and patient. Mama, I know all the safety rules. I know to always treat a gun like it's loaded, never point it at anything I don't want to destroy, keep my finger off the trigger until I'm ready to shoot, and be sure of my target and what's behind it. Maria blinked in surprise. Where did you learn all that? From Daddy, Emma said simply. He taught me the rules even though I never held a gun. He said everyone should know gun safety, even if they never plan to shoot. Morrison made his decision. Mrs. Rodriguez, what if we start very small? Emma could try shooting an air rifle at paper targets, with multiple safety officers present and every possible precaution in place. If she demonstrates proper safety awareness and control, we could consider progressing to something larger. Dr. Hoffman nodded approvingly. That seems like a reasonable approach. We could monitor Emma's psychological response to the activity and ensure that it remains positive and healthy. Maria looked at her daughter, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the possibility. Finally, she sighed. Okay. But I want every safety measure you can think of. And if I decide I'm not comfortable with how things are going, we stop immediately. Absolutely, Morrison agreed. Emma's safety is our top priority. 2 days later, Emma found herself on a special training range that had been set up specifically for her introduction to marksmanship. The range was shorter than the standard SEAL facilities, with targets placed at distances from 25 to 100 meters. The rifle selected for Emma's first shooting experience was a precision air rifle that fired .22 caliber pellets. It was powerful enough to provide realistic ballistics at short distances, but safe enough for a beginner to handle with proper supervision. Emma approached the rifle with the same careful attention she had shown during her observation sessions. She examined the safety mechanisms, checked the sight settings, and reviewed the basic operating procedures with Chief Walsh, who had volunteered to serve as her primary instructor. Remember, Emma, Walsh said patiently, safety is the first priority, accuracy is second. Even if you don't hit the target, as long as you handle the rifle safely, you're doing everything right. Emma nodded solemnly. I understand, Chief Walsh. Safety first. As Emma took her position behind the rifle, every adult on the range felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. They were about to discover whether Emma's theoretical understanding of marksmanship would translate to practical ability. The target was a simple bullseye placed 25 meters downrange. For an adult shooter, it would be considered an easy shot. For an 8-year-old with no practical shooting experience, it represented a significant challenge. Emma adjusted her position on the shooting mat, carefully aligning herself with the rifle and the target. She checked her breathing, just as she had observed the SEALs doing, and placed her finger lightly on the trigger. The range fell silent as everyone watched Emma prepare for her first shot. Take your time, Walsh whispered. There's no rush. Emma remained motionless for several seconds, concentrating on the sight picture and her breathing pattern. Then, so smoothly that it seemed almost effortless, she squeezed the trigger. The pellet struck the target dead center. The silence that followed was profound. Every person on the range stared at the target in disbelief. A perfect center hit on the first shot was unusual even for experienced shooters. Was that a lucky shot? Thompson asked quietly. Let's find out, Walsh replied, his voice filled with wonder. Emma, would you like to try again? Emma's second shot struck within a quarter inch of the first. Her third shot was equally precise. By the time she had fired 10 rounds, she had created a group that would have been impressive for a seasoned marksman. How did you do that? Morrison asked, genuinely amazed. Emma looked up from the rifle with a smile that was both proud and slightly confused. I just did what I've been watching everyone else do, she said. It's not that different from what I expected. Dr. Hoffman was taking detailed notes throughout the session, documenting not just Emma's accuracy, but her emotional state and reaction to the activity. "Emma, how do you feel right now?" she asked. "Good," Emma replied. "It's fun, but it's also, I don't know, it feels natural, I guess." As the session progressed, Emma's accuracy remained consistently remarkable. When the targets were moved to 50 meters, her groups remained tight and centered. At 75 meters, she continued to demonstrate precision that defied explanation. "I want to try something," Walsh said after Emma had completed several series at increasing distances. "Emma, instead of aiming at the center of the target, could you try hitting specific points? Maybe the upper right corner of the bullseye?" Emma nodded and adjusted her aim. Her shot struck exactly where Walsh had requested. "Now the lower left?" "Another perfect hit." "Emma," Morrison said, his voice filled with awe, "you're not just accurate. You have precision control that I've never seen before." Emma beamed with pride, but her response was characteristically modest. "I just try to do what I've been watching everyone else do. Plus, Daddy always says that shooting is just math and physics." As the session concluded, the adults gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. Emma's performance had exceeded every expectation and raised new questions about the nature of her abilities. "Colonel," Dr. Hoffman said privately, "what we just saw was extraordinary. Emma's hand-eye coordination, her understanding of the shooting process, and her emotional control are all far beyond what we would expect for her age." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "The question is, what do we do with this information?" Dr. Chen, who had observed the entire session, spoke up. "We need to be very careful about how we proceed. Emma clearly has exceptional abilities, but she's still a child. We can't lose sight of that." As Emma packed up her equipment and prepared to leave with her mother, she turned to Morrison with another question that would shape the direction of the program. "Colonel Morrison," she said, "do you think someday I could try shooting at the same distances as the SEALs? I'd really like to see if I can do as well as they do." Morrison looked at the 8-year-old who had just demonstrated shooting abilities that surpassed many professional soldiers. "Emma," he said slowly, "I think you might be able to do better than they do." As the Rodriguez family drove home that evening, Emma chattered excitedly about her first shooting experience. In the backseat of their car, completely unaware of the broader implications of her performance, sat a little girl who had just taken the first step toward rewriting every record in military marksmanship history. 6 months after Emma Rodriguez first wandered onto the SEAL training range, the Coronado base was hosting the most unusual marksmanship evaluation in military history. Representatives from the Pentagon, the Naval Special Warfare Command, and several prestigious military academies had gathered to witness what many still refused to believe was possible. Emma, now 9 years old, sat calmly in the ready area, reviewing her equipment with the methodical precision that had become her trademark. She had grown several inches since her first shooting session, and her equipment had been adjusted accordingly. But her essential nature remained unchanged. She was still a bright, curious child who happened to possess extraordinary abilities. "Are you nervous as Mija?" asked her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, who had been granted special permission to attend the evaluation. Emma considered the question seriously. "A little bit," she admitted. "But, mostly, I'm excited. I want to see how well I can do." Over the past months, Emma's training had progressed under the most carefully controlled conditions imaginable. Every session was supervised by multiple experts in child development, safety officers, and marksmanship instructors. The progression had been gradual but steady, moving from air rifles to .22 caliber weapons, and, finally, to the full-sized rifle systems used by SEAL snipers. Dr. Patricia Hoffman had documented every step of Emma's development, creating what would become the definitive study of exceptional childhood abilities in high-stress technical fields. Her reports had influenced policy discussions at the highest levels of government and educational institutions. "Emma," Dr. Hoffman said, approaching the young girl, "remember that today isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about you doing your best and enjoying the experience." Emma nodded, but her expression suggested she understood the broader significance of the day. Over the months, she had gradually become aware that her abilities were considered unusual, though she remained largely unaffected by the attention. Colonel Morrison, who had become something of a mentor to Emma, addressed the assembled observers. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness represents 6 months of carefully monitored training and development. Emma Rodriguez has demonstrated marksmanship abilities that challenge our understanding of human potential. The evaluation would consist of 3 phases, each designed to test different aspects of Emma's abilities. The first phase involved precision shooting at known distances, similar to standard military qualification courses. The second phase would test her ability to engage targets at unknown distances, requiring her to estimate range and make appropriate adjustments. The final phase would simulate complex tactical scenarios similar to those faced by operational snipers. General Robert Hayes, who had flown in from Washington specifically for the evaluation, spoke quietly to Morrison. "Colonel, I've read your reports, but I need to see this with my own eyes. The implications are too significant to accept on faith alone." Morrison nodded understandingly. "Sir, I had the same reaction 6 months ago. Sometimes you have to see it to believe it." Emma's first challenge was a series of shots at targets placed at distances of 300, 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. Each distance represented a significant technical challenge, requiring different adjustments for bullet drop, wind drift, and atmospheric conditions. As Emma took her position behind the rifle, the assembled observers fell silent. She had chosen to use a Macmillan TAC-50 rifle, the same weapon system used by elite military snipers around the world. The rifle was nearly as tall as Emma herself, but she handled it with confidence and skill. Emma's preparation routine had become almost ritualistic in its precision. She checked atmospheric conditions, evaluated wind patterns, and calculated the ballistic requirements for each target. Her notes, written in careful 9-year-old handwriting, contained mathematical calculations that would have challenged many college students. Her first shot, at 300 meters, struck dead center. The second shot, at 600 meters, was equally precise. As she progressed to the longer distances, her accuracy remained consistent and remarkable. At 800 meters, Emma's shot group measured less than 2 inches, a performance that exceeded the qualification standards for military snipers. At 1,000 meters, shooting at a target that appeared smaller than a dime to the naked eye, she maintained sub-minute of angle accuracy. "Impossible," whispered Dr. James Carter, a ballistics expert from the Army Marksmanship Unit. "The physical limitations of human vision should make that level of precision impossible at that distance." Chief Walsh, who had become Emma's primary instructor, overheard the comment. "Sir, I've been working with Emma for 6 months, and I still don't fully understand how she does it. But I can tell you that there's nothing impossible about it when you watch her work." The second phase of the evaluation proved even more impressive. Emma was presented with targets at unknown distances ranging from 400 to 1,200 meters, requiring her to estimate range and make appropriate adjustments without assistance. Using a combination of techniques she had learned and some that she seemed to have developed intuitively, Emma accurately estimated ranges within 5% of their actual distances. Her shot placement remained consistently precise, demonstrating not just technical skill but tactical understanding. "How did you know that target was 850 meters?" asked Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Williams, a former Marine sniper instructor who had joined the evaluation team. Emma pointed to various reference points in the terrain. "Well, I could see that the trees behind it were a certain size compared to the target, and the way the heat shimmer looked told me about how much air was between me and the target. Plus, the sound when my bullet hit took a certain amount of time to come back." Gunnery Sergeant Williams shook her head in amazement. "Emma, what you just described is advanced fieldcraft that takes most snipers years to master." The final phase of the evaluation presented Emma with complex scenarios that required not just accurate shooting, but tactical decision-making under pressure. Targets appeared and disappeared at random intervals, simulating the kind of dynamic situations faced in combat environments. Emma approached these challenges with the same methodical calm she had shown throughout her training. She prioritized targets based on threat assessment, managed her ammunition efficiently, and adapted to changing conditions with remarkable flexibility. In one particularly challenging scenario, Emma was required to engage 5 targets at varying distances within a 2-minute time limit. Not only did she successfully engage all targets, but she completed the sequence with nearly a minute to spare. "That was actually kind of fun," Emma said after completing the scenario. "It was like a really complicated puzzle." As the formal evaluation concluded, the observers gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. The numbers were undeniable. Emma had not only met the standards for elite military snipers, she had exceeded them in several categories. Her accuracy scores placed her in the top 1% of all military marksmen. Her speed and efficiency in complex scenarios rivaled those of snipers with years of combat experience. Most remarkably, her consistency across different conditions and scenarios suggested a level of fundamental understanding that transcended mere technical training. Colonel Morrison, General Hayes said privately, "I owe you an apology. When I first read your reports, I thought you had lost your objectivity. What I've witnessed today defies everything I thought I knew about human limitations." Morrison smiled. "Sir, I had the same reaction 6 months ago. Emma has a way of challenging assumptions." Dr. Hoffman approached with a folder full of documentation from the day's events. "Colonel, from a developmental standpoint, what we've seen today is unprecedented. Emma has demonstrated technical mastery while maintaining completely normal emotional and psychological development. She's still very much a 9-year-old child who happens to be extraordinarily gifted." As the evaluation concluded, Emma was surrounded by congratulations from the assembled experts. But her most meaningful moment came when her father approached with tears in his eyes. "Mija," Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so proud of you. Not because you're the best shot I've ever seen, but because you never stopped being my little girl." Emma hugged her father tightly. "Daddy, does this mean I really helped make everyone better at their jobs?" "You did more than that, Emma," Miguel replied. "You showed all of us what's possible when someone approaches challenges with curiosity and determination." Colonel Morrison gathered the group for a final announcement. "Today, Emma Rodriguez has officially set new records in every category of military marksmanship evaluation. Her scores will be entered into the official records, making her the youngest person ever to qualify at the expert level in military sniper operations." The applause that followed was heartfelt and sustained. But Emma's response was characteristically modest. "Thank you," she said simply. "I just tried to do my best and have fun while I was learning." As the crowd began to disperse, Emma approached Colonel Morrison with one final question. "Colonel Morrison, what happens now? Do I keep training with the SEALs?" Morrison knelt down to Emma's level, considering how to answer. "Emma, that depends on what you want to do. You've proven that you can excel at this, but you're still a young girl with your whole life ahead of you. The choice is yours." Emma thought carefully before responding. "I like helping people get better at important things. And I like solving complicated problems. So maybe I could keep doing this sometimes, but also do other things too?" Morrison smiled. "I think that sounds like a perfect plan, Emma." 3 years later, Emma Rodriguez, now 12 years old, split her time between regular middle school classes and occasional consultations with special operations units from around the world. Her insights had influenced training programs across multiple military branches, and her techniques had been incorporated into sniper schools throughout the NATO alliance. She had published 2 technical papers on advanced marksmanship theory, co-authored with her adult collaborators. She had been invited to speak at military academies and had even briefed senior Pentagon officials on innovative training methodologies. But, perhaps most importantly, Emma had remained essentially unchanged from the curious 8-year-old who had wandered onto a firing range out of innocent curiosity. She still asked endless questions, still approached each challenge with enthusiasm and wonder, and still found joy in helping others achieve excellence. The military community had learned as much from Emma's character as from her abilities. Her story had become a reminder that extraordinary potential could emerge from the most unexpected sources, and that sometimes the most profound insights came from those who approached problems with fresh eyes and an open mind. Dr. Hoffman's final report on the Emma Rodriguez case study concluded with an observation that would influence educational and military policies for generations: exceptional ability, when combined with proper support, appropriate challenges, and respect for the individual's essential humanity, can achieve outcomes that redefine our understanding of human potential. Emma's story had begun with a simple question asked by a curious child. It had evolved into a fundamental reassessment of how society identified, nurtured, and utilized exceptional abilities. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements came not from following established protocols, but from maintaining the courage to see possibilities where others saw only impossibilities. As Emma prepared for high school, already having been accepted to several prestigious universities on early admission, she remained focused on the simple principle that had guided her from the beginning: approach every challenge with curiosity, treat every person with respect, and never stop asking why and how. The little girl who had interrupted a military exercise had grown into a young woman who had permanently altered the landscape of military training and human development research. But, in her heart, she remained what she had always been, a bright, determined child who saw the world as an endless series of fascinating problems waiting to be solved. Colonel Morrison, now General Morrison, often reflected on that first morning when Emma had walked onto his firing range. What had seemed like a disruption had become the most significant moment of his career. The day he learned to listen to a child's perspective had been the day his understanding of leadership and excellence had been forever transformed. Emma Rodriguez had indeed rewritten every SEAL sniper record, but her greatest achievement was proving that exceptional potential could flourish when met with wisdom, patience, and unwavering belief in the power of human possibility.